my agenda, two parts. So basically, first I will talk about where I think are the research opportunities in my research field, and then I will also give some suggestions about the first few years of the assistant professor. So my research field is empirical asset pricing, but I'm more interested in looking at the interaction of the institutional investors and asset pricing. So who are the institutional investors? So they include mutual funds, pension funds, insurance companies, and hedge funds as well. You can also think about banks as big institutional investors. For sure they are, but there is a separate banking literature which I'm not going to talk about. Also, my research is more about the interaction between institutions and asset pricing, so I will call it institutional asset pricing. So what are the things that people in this research field care about? A lot of different topics. So they care about how do institutions allocate their assets, what their preferences are, and what risks do they take, and how whether they have skill or not, and how do you measure the performance of these institutional investors. And also they care about the behavior of the investors to the institutional investors. So here we're talking about flows into mutual funds and hedge funds, what kind of behavior you observe there. And also, as big institutions, oftentimes they may have information, and so that's why a lot of people believe that these institutions are informed investors, and they help to make the market prices to be more efficient. And so one central question is, how do these institutional investors come up with this information? Where's their source of information? And also, what is the reason that certain institutions behave in a certain way? So that ties to what kind of incentive do they get? And also, when the institutions go about and start trading, what kind of trading behavior do they exhibit? And finally, all these questions will have implications about asset pricing. So that's how everything is tied together. Now, this is a really big research field. So I did some quicker study looking at the top 3 finance journals, how many papers have been published just in this area. And guess what? I found almost 300 papers published during the past 20 years, since 2000. So this is really a huge field, and so for the short time I have, I won't be able to really give a solid, thorough literature review on this. But one pattern I tend to see is that with all these papers, majority of the papers are published in that focus on U.S. equity market. 70% of the papers are in that field. Right, and that actually gives me an idea that there might be some research opportunity going on. Okay, so let's just give you some, idea how many papers are published in different subjects. So the red line is the papers that are focused on U.S. stocks, and you see that clearly on top of the bar, right? And the rest, what are they? So they are. The papers that are looking at the money market, bonds, and loans. So here I will call them debt market. And also some are looking at international equity, and some are also looking at derivatives. But compared with domestic equity, all the other fields are really number of papers that are published in these other areas are really small. Okay, if anything, that maybe there's a slight trend for the debt part, the research. There has been more research, especially after the financial crisis, that are published in the bond market, right? For important reasons. So I think that this actually gives us a research potential research opportunity that maybe now, after 20 years of maybe. Definitely a lot longer than 20 years, but after so many years that people have focused on the equity market, now might be the time that we actually spend more energy in the other markets. Now, I have done some research in the other markets, so I've looked at how institutions obtain information from the loan market and also what their behavior in the corporate bond market. Whenever I started to present these papers, number one question is, why studying in a bond market or loan market is interesting? Given that we have already got so many findings in the stock market, can we just simply take what is found in the stock market and infer that what you're going to see in the bond market, and why there's a need to produce another paper in the bond market, right? What is your marginal contribution, right? And if you cannot convince the audience that there's a marginal contribution, then the chance of publication in a top journal is going to be really small, right? But the good news is that stock market is not equal to bond market. So there are research that in the stock market you find something, and it turns out that if you carry it into the bond market, you get completely different results. And that is because fundamentally the stock market and bond market, they work very differently. Okay? Let me just give you a couple of examples. So for example, timing ability, like here we're talking about market timing ability. In the stock market, people have this very rare evidence, or very little evidence that people find the equity mutual funds has market timing ability. But when it comes to bond market, there is this RFS paper that shows that for bond funds, they have strong market timing ability. Okay, that's something different. There's another interesting paper that looked at flow performance sensitivity. Now, if you have worked in the this area, so you know that in the stock market, there's a very well-established finding that the flow performance sensitivity is convex. Okay, so investors respond very strongly to positive performance, but don't respond much to the bad past performance of the mutual fund managers. But when you carry this analysis into the bond market, you find exactly opposite. Okay, so there you find that flows respond less to the positive performance, more strongly to the negative performance. Okay, but and the paper is published at JFE. But then the more important question is why there's such a difference between the two markets. And there the author suggests that there is because the bond market is really illiquid, and there is a strategic complementarity, right? So basically, when you see a bad performance, and you know that if I don't withdraw money, maybe somebody else will withdraw money. But as soon as they withdraw money, these money managers will start to dump assets into the market, and because this market is so illiquid, it's going to generate big impact to the asset prices and also hurt the performance of the managers a lot. Now, if you are the one that is moving the mass, you will be the one that is actually suffer from this negative externality. Okay, so that's why when people observe that for very illiquid bonds that are getting some outflow, they'll be the one wanting to jump out the first, and that's why you see the stronger return of performance flow sensitivity. Okay, so. And all this points down to this important feature that we observe in the corporate bond market. That is that the corporate bond market is super illiquid compared with the stock market. Okay, and another strength of literature recently people have focused on is whether we see a fire sale effect. Now, again, in the stock market literature, we have already got a lot of evidence that there is a fire sale. So when managers get outflow, and they have to satisfy the money withdrawal by redemption by dumping a lot of shares into the stock market, and by dumping all these shares at the worst timing, they actually have to suffer from a big price impact, and that's the fire sale story. Now in the bond market, it turns out that there has been mixed evidence for that. Okay, so some people find that. Like when a company gets downgraded, the insurance companies, like say the company is getting downgraded from investment grade to junk bonds, for regulatory reasons, the insurance company have to unload these bonds, and when they unload, that's a fire sale, and they get to suffer from that fire sale. But recently there are other studies showing that this might not be the case. So if you look at the mutual funds flows and the fire sales, you find that there's a little evidence of fire sale. This is really puzzling because we are looking at a really illiquid market. How come there's not much evidence of fire sale going on there? And the argument raised by the paper is that even though this market is really illiquid, and actually because this market is really illiquid, the bond funds pay special attention to their liquidity management. So actually they can take preventative procedures ahead of time so that they can minimize the fire sale effect. And that's why you don't see it, right? But I would still say that this is an ongoing research, and new research results new papers are popping up in this part. I don't think that we are settled, right? And recently I've been working on bond fragility. And so basically this is taking from this stronger flow performance sensitivity on the downside research and expand. So basically, what does this stronger flow performance sensitivity on the downside implies is that these bond funds are very fragile, right? So they're because they are very illiquid, and they actually, whenever they have a really, not really, even a small negative performance could trigger a very large outflow, okay? Now, in this paper, we were trying to see whether this fragility from the financial institutions spill over to the assets that they hold. And there we find very interesting evidence. So we actually come up with proxies for how individual funds, individual corporate bonds are subject to this fragility from the investors who are holding them. So based on the fragilities of the institutions, we can construct a bond level fragility measure, and we find that this fragility measure has strong prediction for future volatility, future liquidity, and downside risk as well. And this fragility for the bond market is especially strong. The prediction is especially strong when the market is under high uncertainty, or when the mutual fund is facing a lot of outflow. Okay. Now there are some other research questions that I haven't seen any paper touched upon, but I think that there are good research opportunities. So the first one is about this economy of scale. Okay, so in the stock literature, there have been evidence showing that when the funds get bigger, the performance gets worse. So this is this economy of scale, right? Even back to Burke and Green's paper, they actually made that assumption. But the question is, does it apply to the bond market? So there I would make some counter-argument that it may not be this case. Although this is totally an open question. I don't think anybody has looked at this. So the reason I think that in the bond market, having a larger size may not necessarily hurt performance is because this larger size bond funds actually get a lot of advantage. So for example, this is a search market. This is a dealer market, but not exchange market. So the dealer oftentimes look to work with financial institutions because that will lower their search costs. And what empirically people have found that large institutions, corporate bond market actually get better treatment. So they get lower transaction cost, right? So that's one advantage for trading the bond market, right? Given that liquidity in the bond market is so important, if you can significantly lower your transaction cost, that will increase your performance a lot, okay? And also, this is a dealer's market, and as big institutions, they get a lot of inflow and outflow, a lot of buy order and sell order from them. So by absorbing different order flows, they can learn how the rest of the market is thinking. So the order flow information is a source of private information that can be learned by only these big institutions. By only observing a large amount of transactions, you can learn it. So that is another advantage for the big institutions in the corporate bond market. So that's why I would hypothesize that this economy of scale in the bond market, in the stock market, may not be generalized to the stock market. Okay, and another idea I don't think people have looked at is the smart money effect in the corporate bond market. The simple reason is that the corporate bond funds have very different set of investors than the stock market. So it will be interesting to see how sophisticated are the investors in the corporate bond corporate funds market. Okay, and also that the reason I think that it's a good time to think about the behavior of corporate bond funds is because of a lot of new regulations that comes out of the after the financial crisis, and this definitely provides a good research opportunity. So in particular, Dodd-Frank Act and Volcker Rule, they have placed tight constraints to the traditional dealers in the corporate bond market. So there have been papers showing that because after these financial regulations, the bank-affiliated dealers, they start to get out of the market. They don't provide liquidity as they did before. Then the question is, who stepped in to replace them? And if you look at the data, you find that mutual funds start to play more and more roles in this field. Okay? But then the question is, are mutual funds and these traditional bank dealers the same? Clearly not. For example, for mutual funds, there's this problem of liquidity mismatch. So on the one hand, these mutual funds are allowing investors to redeem their shares on a daily basis. On the other hand, they are holding very illiquid corporate bonds. So that creates a liquidity mismatch, and that would be a systematic risk. And in fact, because of that concern, the SEC create rules to require these open-ended bond funds to establish their liquidity management programs and report it to SEC. But then it's unclear whether having such liquidity constraint or liquidity management liquidity requirement is a good thing or not. At least theoretically, there are papers that argue that if you actually impose investors to hold cash, that actually can lead to liquidity dry up later on. Okay, I'm not going to go into the details, but I just want to say that ex ante, the hypothesis can go either way. But I don't think people have done research on that. Now, another interesting question is that as these mutual funds go into this field, their preferences are very different from the traditional players in this market, like insurance, like pension funds. Now, insurance and pension funds, they are very long-term investors. They don't turn over very much. Mutual funds, they turn over a lot. And because they turn over a lot, they tend to prefer liquid bonds. And insurance company and the other type of institutional investors, they tend to prefer less liquid bonds. Now, as we see the change of the constitution of the investor base in this market, that could lead to different patterns in asset prices. So, for example, how do asset prices of liquid bonds versus illiquid bonds change over the time period? And also, how does the systematic risk of the bond market change over the period? So all these, I think, are open questions. And another research opportunity, which is also related to the financial crisis, is after the financial crisis, all the central banks are racing to lower their interest rate. So there's a low interest rate policy going on that has been last for 10 years now, right? So the question is, how does this low interest rate policy affect the behavior of investors? So some people have found that there's a reach for yield effect. So facing a market where the interest rate is so low, investors have to take higher risk to jack up their return. And they find this phenomenon in the insurance companies, in money market funds, and in banks as well. Okay? Recently, I have a paper that also looked at the connection between the bond market and stock market. And there, we find that investors are substituting from the bond market into the high dividend stocks. Because for high dividend stock, they view it as staples, another source of stable income. So bond is a source of stable income, but high dividend stocks is another source of stable income. And we find that the interest rate policy affect how investors switch between bond market and high dividend stocks, and that can generate a lot of actually that generates some price distortion in the dividend stocks market. Now, all these are under the umbrella of asset pricing, but I think one interesting question is to study how does this different, the low interest rate policy, because they affect the asset prices, ultimately affect how the firm behave, right? So does that change the capital structure of the corporations? And being that there are some institutions willing to invest more in those risky areas, do the firms start to issue loans or bonds in those areas? And also, how do they change the dividend policy of these firms, right? So that would be something interesting. So that's the first part about the research opportunities. And the second part, I was also going to talk about some tips. And so one thing I want to point out is that there are different the tips we give out. You have to think about it whether it applies to your particular scenario or not. So I remember when I was on the job market, I was here, and I hear the professors talking, and they happen to have a very different, conflicting views about how to generate research ideas. And I was torn at that time, right? Think about which one I should, follow. But then I think that all of them have a point. It's just that they come from a different setting, different background, and like obviously, if you're doing empirical research, probably you will follow a lot about the market and the news and this stuff, and pay attention to what are the new data generated. But if you are doing theoretical research, then actually you think more from inside, right? Not letting the market drive your thought. It's more like internally generating idea. So I think there's no really conflict. It's just that different ideas works in different contexts. So I just want to point it out because these the tips that I'm giving out. I want you to first think, does it apply to myself? Okay. Another thing I want to point it out that the suggestion I give out is for someone who's starting to it's more for assistant professors. Right, it's so kind of like the first few years of what we should do, I actually admit that my tenure process is not the most smooth one. Okay, and so a lot of, but I'm not the only. I'm not a lone case. A lot of people's their tenure case are kind of like marked on the margin, right? And so it would be great if you guys, your tenure process is a lot smoother than mine. That would be great. But I think that after the fact that I did get my tenure, I started to reflect a little bit what I did right that helped me, and what I should have done that I regret that I didn't do. Okay. So the tips I'm giving is more like reflecting my personal path, right? My personal experience. So the first, comes to my first suggestion, and this is something that I regret that I didn't do. Okay, and this is basically to submit your job market paper before the end of the first year. Okay, and why? Now, getting publications in top journals is really difficult, and that's why when people often suggest you don't submit your paper too soon. You want to make sure that you get your paper really polished, but also that time runs very fast. Okay, and it's really important for you to publish your job market paper. Most of the time, the job market paper is a single author paper, and guess what? this will probably be your only chance for most people that publish a single author paper. Later on, most of the time, as I agree with the panelists, the best thing to do is to work with a co-author. There's so many benefits. I really enjoy working with co-author. So that's why later on, most of your publications is likely to be co-author papers. But at the time of tenure, the review committee is going to look for evidence of independence research. And what is the shooting gun that can, say I have independence is to have a solo author paper. And that's likely to be your job market paper. So that's why I think this is very important for you to publish your job market paper. I, unfortunately, didn't submit my job market paper soon enough. Okay, a lot of people never submitted their job market paper. And by not submitting your job market paper, definitely you just kill your chance of publishing that paper. And by not submitting soon enough, it can also significantly lower your chance of publishing that paper. In my case, I didn't submit my paper in the first 2-3 years for family reasons. And by the time that I want to submit, there are 2 A-journal publications for the same topic. So it's, when I submit to journal, people say, what's the marginal contribution? Even though I was the first one that write down the paper, but it doesn't help, right? During this year, you guys have already presented your paper a lot to different people. I'm sure you have already collected a lot of great feedbacks. So those will be good enough. Don't sit down and wait for more feedbacks. Just work on those feedbacks and polish it and send it out. And another thing is that the reason I wanted to push you to send out your job market paper soon is because later on, you will generate a lot of new ideas that are co-authored. So new ideas will pop in. You will never take time to publish the single author paper, right? All right. Second thing, this point has been mentioned multiple times already this morning, is to have a mentor. This is the part that I'm glad that I was lucky to find a mentor, more than one mentors, and I benefit a lot. So these mentors could be the senior colleagues in your department in the same research area, and it could be a senior colleague in other schools that also happen to have you also have same research ideas or similar research interests. And it may start from you work on a paper together, but then later on you form such a trustful relationship that actually you can consult a lot of things with them. So, for example, Clemens was one of my mentors. I really benefit a lot from his help. So when you have a mentor, a very trustful mentor, you can ask him or her to read your paper, even though it's not co-authored with them. You can ask them to read your reference report, and also I even asked my mentor to look at all my working papers on the first 2-3 years, and ask them, am I diluting my research agenda too much? Am I going to too many different areas? Or do you think that my research area is focused enough? Because as mentioned earlier, you need to be able to form a brand of yourself. So no one would spend energy on writing up every area, right? So my mentor helped me actually to structure my research agenda in the early years. And also they will support you throughout the career, right? As Laura mentioned earlier, the sponsorship, right? So when it comes to tenure, they can look at your research statement, and that they can even write letters for you. They can, if it is within your department, they can be a strong advocate for your case. Time management, that's crucial. We are all very busy. Work on a lot of projects, do teaching, make sure you do good job there, and also you will also do service. And this problem is getting worse and worse after you get tenure, you get more service to do, and also you may start a family and start to have kids, and that's another thing. So I had my first kid the first year I joined my school, so I was so busy. right? So time management is really crucial. And so one thing is to prioritize your different research projects, and try to first publish the work that are more advanced, then start to think about new research ideas. Okay, and also think about dedication and think about what you care most. Okay, so as a mom, I care about spending time with my kids, so I do a lot of that. But I don't care whether the food that my kids are having is good or whether my house is clean. Okay, so for these, I dedicate it to people. I hire people to do house cleaning, to do cooking, but I make sure that I at least spend quality time with my kids. Compartment your time, right? So making sure that you at least devote a few days in a week that is fully for research. For those days, I don't touch on teaching or service. Try best not to. Work when you are productive, and do not work when you are not productive. We're not machines, right? So we cannot work for 24 hours. So we have to understand our pattern. What is the most efficient hours that you work? Are you an early morning person or are you a late night person? Try to make those important projects only on those times, and then for the rest of the day, just enjoy your life. And then be organized, right? This is something that I started to be more and more appreciate, because sometimes it may be a program that you write 6 months ago, and now you need to pick up, and you have no clue what you want because you were very lousy in commenting your programs, and that is a huge transaction cost. And so you will make sure that when you start to write a program, think about, I need to make sure that in 6 months I can pick up this program very easily. So be very organized with your work. And also set a goal that help you to make progress. Okay, set a daily goal, set a weekly goal, and also use deadlines to push yourself. Okay, be a good colleague and be a good citizen. That always help. So we live in a world that reputation really matters. And so when it comes to getting invitation for discussions, say yes. And when you discuss it, try to be helpful and constructive. But critical definitely, but helpful, okay? And the referee report, again, say yes. And be on time for the referee report. Be critical and analytical. Be helpful more for the editor than the paper itself. Sometimes you may see the referee reports very, very long, but you are rejecting that paper. I mean, that's is helping the authors, but that's not the point of the refereeing process. Actually, that's a bad practice that would actually make authors shop for feedbacks by submitting to a journal. So the paper should not have been submitted, but they just submit because they want to get feedbacks. That creates a very bad momentum. So I think as a profession, we should not discourage that. So that's why do not try to provide really lengthy report if you don't think that the paper is publishable. Another thing is that be a nice colleague. Okay, so try to provide suggestions to your colleague's paper. And finally, I should say that even though this is a pretty stressful field, I would say, but it's still we are very blessed to be in this field. So we are our own boss, right? You get to work on whatever you want, and you get to work on it whenever you want. Okay, so you have a lot of flexibility. So definitely enjoy what you are doing, and also enjoy where you are. Okay, and also give time to your family. Even I would say I benefit from that because actually it helped me to release pressure. With the time, but when I spend time with my kids, actually it helped me to release my pressure from work. And finally, have a life.